Good evening, and thanks for joining me. I'm Joe Carbonetta, and this is Arroyo Live. Our program is produced by and through the facilities of Pasadena Media to help enrich our community through informative and meaningful conversation. Remember, you can share your questions or comments with us anytime at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org. We all remember the introduction to law enforcement officials that each of us is given early in our school careers. The image of a dependable, trustworthy, and friendly police officer waving to the children on the schoolyard while coming to the aid of a kind elderly lady whose cat is stuck in a tree. Throughout the decades, the role of police officers in our country has undergone many changes, both in method and in perception. From reform era to problem-oriented to today's community-based approach, successive generations have seen the good as well as the not-so-good side of law enforcement. Recent issues, such as the high-profile killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, have called into question the trust we, as Americans, are taught to place in our law enforcement officials on a national scale. But the distrust in our legal system, and those entrusted with enforcing it, runs much deeper in many communities across our nation, and not without reason. Perhaps brought about, in part, by recent displays of civil protest, police departments around the country have begun creating oversight commissions to better police the police and to try to seek long-term solutions to issues like apparent inequities in the way enforcement is handled. Today, we take a look at one such commission. Joining me will be Juliana Serrano, Senior Associate at Peace and Justice and the Office for Creative Connections at All Saints Church, Alan Edson, President of the Pasadena chapter of the NAACP, as well as Alan Shea, Vice Chair of the Northwest Commission for the City of Pasadena. Stay with us as we discuss the Pasadena Police Oversight Committee here on Arroyo Live. Joining me now are Ms. Juliana Serrano and Mr. Alan Edson. Thank you both for coming on the program. Obviously, this evening we are discussing the Pasadena Police Department Oversight Commission. But before we get into all of the questions, perhaps it would be beneficial to our viewers at home if we had a little discussion about its creation and the plans for the commission. You know what, Juliana, if it's okay, I'm going to put you on the spot and we'll go with you first.
Great. Well, Joe, after many years of public pressure, the Pasadena City Council really responded finally to what was happening at the national level, that there was a movement calling for a demand that our elected officials really participate significantly in the transformation of our law enforcement agencies across the nation. And while our City Council on numerous occasions continuously rejected the need for any police reform, they really heard the cries of the public after the murder of George Floyd and began to take action. And it was after several months of conversation and deliberation that in October they made the decision to move forward with the creation of a oversight commission that would consist of members of our community, that would work alongside an independent police auditor in radically reviewing and providing suggestions on how to change our police department and make it one that is better, stronger, and more reflective of what the community needs and wants are.
All right. Alan, I was wondering if you might have anything to add to that.
Wow. Juliana kind of took all the wind out of my sails.
She did sum that up very eloquently, didn't she?
She did. But as she said, this has been a long time coming. The work has been going on here for probably the past 30 years with the work of a police advocate, Michael Zinzin, and, has been moving forward. As Juliana mentioned, City Councilman John Kennedy, presented this to the City Council in 2016, and it was soundly rejected. This year, after the murder of George Floyd, community groups got together and we presented our Community Bill of Rights. And the first item in that Bill of Rights was the creation of a Community Oversight Commission. And so I think, that along with the pressure locally and also with the kind of the tone that was being carried out across the country for police reform, finally led to some action by our city council.
Well, Mr. Edson, you mentioned Michael Zinzin, and he actually used to do a program for us here at Pasadena Media many, many years ago, Message to the Grassroots. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Michael Zinzin for just a second.
Well, I met, Michael in Oakland, California. A community group that I was involved in gave him an award. And, so he, just talked about policing in Pasadena and, how it needs to be changed. And he was an advocate to see that change happen. And, so as we've evolved now, that, something such as the Civilian Oversight Commission, it'd be something that, he'd like to have seen, in place. To give the community more of a voice to address police and community issues.
If I can ask you both, now that we've sort of laid out exactly what the police commission is and outlined some of the hopes that they would like to achieve, how do you both, and each of you, I'm asking in turn, how do you feel about the police commission? Does it go far enough? Are there further additions that you'd like to see? I'd like to get your opinions on what's been done so far and where they hope to go with it.
Well, the council voted to move ahead with the commission in October, which is a great first step. Just recently, an application has been sent out for people that are interested in being part of that commission. Can apply. There is no deadline, for applications, but it's a great first step, and we'll see how this thing evolves. I think there's a lot of work still to be done. There may have been some disappointment that it wasn't the first item on the Public Safety Council's agenda last week, but we're moving forward. And, progress is progress.
Juliana, I see you nodding your head in agreement there.
Yes, absolutely. I want to just stress that as a member of this community that has been advocating for civilian oversight of the Pasadena Police Department for probably close to 7 years and working alongside other community members like Alan in this advocacy, that bringing oversight to the police department is a strategy to improve police community relations. And it is not a cure-all. It is not a mend-all. It is not the only tool that we want to explore in terms of strengthening police community relations and, again, building public trust in law enforcement once again. And it is an important one. And so I want to acknowledge the significance of the council finally making this decision, because, again, it has been a long time and we have been on it alongside Councilmember Kennedy for several years in this advocacy, and to finally get Pasadena to realize that we don't have to wait to become Baltimore or Ferguson to have these national incidents that sort of put a spotlight on us to take action. We can take action now. And I say that acknowledging we've had our own tragedies, right? But maybe they haven't garnered the national attention that has been garnered in other communities. We have an opportunity here to work together to strengthen our police department, to make it a better police department. I think that creating a police oversight commission that consists of community members can do that. Now, the devil will be in the details. The council still has much to determine in terms of the makeup and the function of the council and the Community Oversight Commission and how they will work specifically with the IPA. I look forward to them making these determinations very soon because we've waited long enough.
What is your impression of the reception from the city council? I know in each of your responses, you mentioned that this has been an ongoing agenda for some time. Juliana, I think you mentioned it's been 7 years in the making. I have heard reports in the media of accusations of political foot dragging. What's the temperature of the room?
Well, I think that I want to first acknowledge that I've been working on this for 7 years, and there are many, many people whose shoulders I am standing on in order to do this advocacy work for the past 7 years. I think that our council has shown itself over the years that it was not supportive of this strategy in strengthening police-community relations. And again, because of the national climate, because of the kinds of conversations that we are now able to have as Americans about the brutality of law enforcement and its impact on Black and brown bodies, I saw how our council realized that there was really no other option for them but to lead in this way. Now, what will happen in the weeks and months to come, again, around its formation and whether or not it will actually have the teeth to be successful is still to be determined. I will confess to you, Joe, that I'm fearful that there are ways in which our council members and our mayor might make decisions about the formation of the Police Oversight Commission and the powers of the IPA that might not give it the grit that's really needed to make the improvements we desire. And then in 1-2 years' time, they will look back and say, see, this didn't work. We sort of knew it all along. This was kind of a bad decision, but the public made us go in this direction, and now we've got to make alternative plans. And so it's really up to members of our community and activists like myself and Alan to continue to push our council members throughout this process to make sure that it really has the power that it needs to be successful.
Yeah.
Alan, I feel that you had something you'd like to add to this.
Well, I think again, it's incumbent on the community to hold our council and our mayor their feet to the fire. This thing just didn't happen. So there's been a strong community support for the Oversight Commission. The City Council did vote unanimously to move ahead with the incorporation of the Oversight Commission. How it the next thing is what does that look like in reality?
Well, certainly the creation of this oversight committee can be seen as a great victory in a long battle. But as we all know, as any veteran would know, there's never a victory without casualties along the way. So that brings up an interesting question. What didn't make it into the Police Oversight Commission? What would you have liked to have seen that is not a part of this?
Well, I think, that's what the Public Safety Committee is going to discuss in the next meeting. We don't know what's going to be the content of the commission and how it, actually plays out. We're hopeful that, there's some powers, for the commission and the commissioners. But a lot is still, kind of wait and see.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the challenge will be that this body, this Oversight Commission, working again with the IPA, can only provide recommendations to the chief and to the department in terms of changing, adjusting policies and practices and, sort of exploring alternatives to ways of operating. And the police chief and the city manager ultimately can make the decision not to move forward with the recommendations that the IPA and the commission bring forth. And so that is going to be limiting and unfortunate, and I'm hoping that we don't see the commission and the IPA hit walls along their journey. But I think it's worth noting that, again, it is purely advisory in nature, and that is just by default the setup for the commission.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to have seen something with more teeth in it, so to speak?
Absolutely. And we recognize that there are several limitations to that, including the power of police unions, and here in the state of California, the Police Officer Bill of Rights, that really limits who gets access to, personnel records regarding law enforcement officials and who has the authority to take disciplinary action against officers.
What will the Oversight Commission's relationship be with the police department and the police union?
I think they can make recommendations, and they will make recommendations. I think, it's again, a wait and see proposition on how that interaction actually takes place. Again, they can't, make a recommendation to hire and fire, based on a police officer's actions. So there are a lot of embedded protections for police officers. And I don't think with the establishment of this commission, those things are going to change. And so it's still going to be a continual, tete-a-tete between the community and the police department.
So this brings up a loaded question. If, in fact, the Oversight Committee is basically relegated to simply making recommendations, what is the recourse if the police department or the leaders choose not to follow any of those recommendations, but rather maintain a business as usual approach?
Well, that's where I think the community has to stay vigilant in watching how this all unfolds and stay in constant communication with the council members and the mayor. I mean, we heard time and time again throughout these conversations at the council level that council members felt like perhaps they were the ones that should be entrusted with this role and responsibility of oversight. In fact, that, maybe they have by default of their elected position and that they are accountable to their constituents. And so what we need to do is remind our elected officials that they are accountable to us. And if we see something not working in our government structures and in the operation of this municipality, that they will be held accountable at the polls for not doing their job and representing their community members adequately.
Yeah, I would agree. And also, I think when the independent auditor is selected, that's where you get a little bit more influence for the ask of information and specifics about what the commission, wants to see, from their role. And again, I think the community is going to be really engaged in seeing that this process, has some, bear some fruit for the community. And it's just not, a situation to where, we say what we say goes. I think there's some, real opportunity to get some corrective action and some real transparency on how the police department operates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd like to go back to your question, Joe, and say that, my hope is, well, it's still yet to be seen how the commission and the IPA will work with the department and the chief. My hope is that it will not be an adversarial relationship, that it will be a collaborative one. Because again, what the IPA is aiming to do and what the commission is aiming to do is strengthen and improve our police department and the relationship between the department and community members. That is the ultimate goal. And in that, there will be challenging times. There will be times where we're going to have to sit down and come to some harsh truths about how we are operating and making some recommendations that may make leaders within the department and officers who are out on the ground feel uncomfortable. And, being uncomfortable is just going to be part of this work. My hope is that everyone can step into it in a way that, again, understands the greater good. I have a lot of confidence in our current chief. I think he sees the value of oversight commissions. He serves on one in his own community. And so that makes me feel hopeful and optimistic about this collaborative relationship between the entities.
Well, okay, Juliana, now it's my turn. I want to touch on a couple of points that you made in asking this next question. You started out early on by saying that you didn't want to overlook the fact that Pasadena itself has had its share of high-profile problems related to the police department. And you just mentioned also that you would like the commission to have a non-adversarial relationship with the police department. With that in mind, when the committee becomes functional, is there an intention for the committee to go back and look at some of these prior incidents, or are they simply going to move forward from the point of creation?
You know, Joe, I think that's one of the areas that still needs to be addressed by the council and determined. Will they be able to retroactively look at previous incidents and make determinations, or will their authority only begin at the time of the commission's inception? We don't know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, that's a big unknown. I would, there are a few, cases that are still pending. The Christopher Blue police beating, and of course the Anthony McLean shooting are still open cases. And I would hope that the commission, seeks information about those particular cases and is able to provide input on, what kind of corrective action that the police department will incorporate in the future, moving forward.
But if the committee is able to go back and start looking at things retroactively, and in fact does take an active role in doing so, might that not be considered an adversarial approach in and of itself?
If that happens, maybe. I think, this is, we're starting at square one. And, it's yet to be seen, with that ability, that they can investigate and ask questions for. And, we'll keep our eye on the Public Safety Committee and see how they, want to structure the, parameters of a commission. And, in doing so, there will be, I was sure, ample community input on everything that comes out of that commission, that committee. And so it's kind of to wait and see.
Well, one of the ultimate goals of the committee in being able to evaluate police performance was to have the ability to subpoena. Is that still actively being pursued, or what is the current status of that?
And that's still on the table, particularly from the position of the independent police auditor.
Yes, my understanding is the resolution that was passed by the council enacting a commission and authorizing the position of IPA as a function of our government does give the body subpoena power. However, it is incredibly limited.
Yeah.
And what are your views on the selection policies?
Well, personally, I would have liked to have seen more, transparency, coming from the ability to, select particularly the community representatives. But this is an open policy, a public process that, applications will have the opportunity to be vetted by the community and responses, be made, accordingly, based on history, if they've had any involvement as in law enforcement in the past. And, so I think that does, provide opportunity.
Yeah, I'm grateful that in the resolution enacting this commission that what has happened is that there will be 3 seats that are open to community members and are not appointments made by council members and or the mayor. And so I think that was a great decision. And I am incredibly disappointed in the reality that the council members and the mayor can declare appointees based on their own selection criteria and qualifications. So the council did not unanimously come to determination of, these are the 5 qualities that we're looking for in a great commission. These are some of the skill sets and qualifications that we're looking for in our candidates that we will appoint. Basically, what they have agreed to is that every council member can select their appointee by their own process, public or not, and with their own criteria. And so for a commission that is as important and critical and significant at this point in our nation's history and in our community's history, to have the council not have a unanimous idea around who they're looking for in candidates is deeply, deeply frustrating. One of the areas as a result of that creates some concern for me is we don't know whether or not former law enforcement officials are going to be allowed to apply for this position. Even in yesterday's city council meeting, Councilmember Madison asked the question, will former felons be allowed to serve on this commission? My hope is that a former felon would, because there's a story there that I think could really add to the work of the commission. I have a feeling that other council members are asking those kinds of questions because they would not be supportive of that. So here we have, again, this discrepancy between the importance of this commission, but no unified decision about what skill sets and qualifications they're looking for in commissioners. That needs to be determined.
It could be interpreted that one of the purposes in creating the Oversight Commission is really to have an advocate for the community wherever there are concerns about how police business is being conducted. What will be their abilities or within their power in cases where there are perceived rights violations?
I'm hoping that there's going to be clean lines of communication between the commissioners and community members to be able to hear concerns directly from the community. And, there will be inevitable pathways that the commission and the IPA will have to create for exploring some of these complaints that are coming from the community and how to explore that with the leadership of the police department in terms of accountability and potentially discipline of officers.
Yeah. And I think pretty much all the cases that have come to the commission will be a rights violation to some degree. That's where, the power that they have will be able to investigate, ask questions. I think the thing is lacking that they don't have any power to discipline officers. And so, the influence that they have, may look good because we have this commission in place. But, do they have a strong arm of the law with them? And, that might not be the case, and that might result in a lot of dissatisfaction in the community. I've watched a few of these incidents, evolve, and, they get packaged in a way that the powers that be always win. And that's what we don't want to see now. And that's, where I'm hopeful that, the commission can change that paradigm. And, the community can finally have some comfort in what law enforcement does and how they operate.
Well, keeping in mind the fact that the Oversight Committee is really going to be a body that is relegated to making recommendations, what is the overall hope or the primary goal of the committee? Is it more a body created to determine whether or not police acted correctly in a given situation, or is it more a situation of them wanting to be able to recommend disciplinary action when in fact an officer has been determined to have not performed correctly in the course of his duties? Or is it a mix of both?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a mix, and probably things that we don't even know yet will probably fall into their purview, right? I think that investigating officer-involved shootings in real time along with the IPA will certainly be a function, and providing recommendations to the department about how to strengthen their reviews of these incidents and the recommendations for discipline for officers involved in them will certainly be the work. And there are going to be other tasks like examining our automatic license plate reader policy and see whether or not that's a practice that is really serving the department and the community well, and whether or not there are recommendations that can be advanced in that particular area of focus. Surveillance, I imagine, is something that the commission is going to take on. Stop and frisk. There are so many areas of policing that I think the community is concerned about, and this body will be a container for receiving some of those concerns, exploring them deeply with one another and with a professional in the form of an IPA, and then making recommendations to the department for changes.
And I don't, what the commission's ability is for policy. But one of the things I'm, constantly hearing is that the police department should comply with AB 392, which was signed by the governor in 2019. And that is that the law permits deadly force only when it's necessary to protect human life, and requires officers to use alternatives to deadly force that are safe and feasible. And so, that has bubbled up, particularly in the situation of Anthony McClain, a victim that was running away from the police. Could other means been utilized to, save his life, as it appears in video that, he wasn't a threat.
Well, one last question here before we move into the break. As far as the committee is concerned, appointments will come from various locations. Each of the council members will be appointing a member to the committee. But among those, 3 of the committee members will be appointed, or at least recommendations for appointment will be given by community-based organizations. In your opinions, is that enough people making up the committee?
It might be have been better to have a more equitable balance. These incidents, take place typically in communities of color, and the community sometimes, is better served if they're represented in that way. And so, how the commission is going to be weighted is going to be weighted heavily on the side of city council. And, this whole idea of justice is always going to, surface. And, so if you're always outvoted 8-3, it doesn't seem to be a fair process. And, we can hope that the integrity and, understanding of our city council people, since they do have the ability to select somebody that's outside their council district, they may be wise to select people that, have their ear to the ground and can provide some balance on the commission.
That's right. I mean, we were advocating throughout this journey, Alan and I and so many others, that it was critical that the commission be made up of people with lived experiences of direct impact by the negative policing that we're trying to combat, right? And we have those community members here, and we need to center this work of reform on their experiences, their stories, their challenges, so that we can learn from them and, again, strengthen the department. So every council member has the opportunity to do that, to select somebody and to center the voices of community members most impacted by negative police violence. We will see whether or not they do that. My hope is that they will. I'm not confident about that. Certainly the 3 community-based organization positions will ensure that more of those voices are present.
When we return, we will be joined by Mr. Alan Shea. Stay with us. This is Arroyo Live. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us again. With us now is also Mr. Alan Shea. Alan Shea, how are you this afternoon? This is going to get confusing.
I'm doing wonderful, Joe, and thank you for inviting me on your show today.
Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you as well. We've been speaking for a little while already, and I'd like to get your impressions of the Oversight Committee, or the creation of the Oversight Committee. I have the benefit of already speaking with Alan and Juliana about this, but I'd like to know about your impressions.
Okay, well, why don't I give you a little background of my journey with my interpretation. I'm a 10-year commissioner for Pasadena in the Northwest. And I chose to go in that commission because I felt it was a real need to pick up the baton from those who came before me. Michael Zinzin was one of them. And so what was happening at the time was we were trying to look at measures to hold the police accountable. And what was going on at the time I decided to was the recession of 2008. We had the murder of Leroy Barnes in 2009, and then I joined the commission shortly thereafter to try and see how we could measure how we can hold police officers accountable. At the time, because of the recession and all the other challenges that were going on, it was difficult. But what happened was with each incident that resulted in a death of a Black man, especially in the Northwest, we as a commission looked at more measures that can be taken to bring about accountability. And every time we developed a measure approach, it would be circumvented somehow by the police. And so as we moved forward to this current oversight commission, I don't think it's going to serve any real purpose. And the reason I say that is because in between this oversight commission being enacted, there was another committee about 2 or 3 years ago that the police department had formed where they had selected committee members to do similar tasks. And we objected to it, the Northwest Commission, and because we knew that we needed some form of independent structure that really had power and authority. And until that happens, anything else they do will be a waste of time.
Well, before I move on to any further questions, I wanted to give Alan and Juliana opportunity to respond to some of the points that you have just made.
Sure.
Well, I mean, this is, again, a new opportunity. I wasn't here 10 years ago. Can't speak to what happened 10 years ago. But, based on what I've seen from community engagement in this effort to, bring civilian oversight to Pasadena, I think the groundswell of support for it is, something to be admired. Again, we've spoken about, we don't know how this thing is going to turn out. We don't know the abilities to, have the recommendations of the commission to be heard as well as be implemented. But now we've got this vehicle, and we'll see how it plays.
Juliana, did you want to add anything, or you think it's all been said already?
I think it has been said, and just want to stress again that I think that this is an opportunity, and it will serve us as long as we stay vigilant as community members and we hold our elected officials accountable to what our needs, our demands are. And over time, we will see the real strength of this commission, but we can't for 1 second stop paying attention and stop advocating for the kinds of reforms that we need in order to protect Black and brown bodies in our community.
Mr. Shea, I think it's a fair assessment to say that you view the committee's recommendation-only role as basically not good for much. Is that a fair assessment?
My background, Alan Edson and Julianne, is a political scientist. When I was a kid growing up in Pasadena, I lived right on Mountain in Worcester, right in the heart of Pasadena. My oldest brother grew up with Michael Zinzi, and they both went to Blair, and they were one of the first students to graduate out of Blair's first graduating class back in around 68. Growing up seeing all those dynamics really added a lot to knowing and understanding our history. And then participating in the process is just crucial. That's what inspired me to want to be a scientist in political science and understand the community. And you look at our history first. That's why I started out my conversation with the history of Michael Zinzian and how that momentum still is a part of our community today that is still unanswered. And we don't have to go through rewriting history. All we need to do is say, look at our leaders, and if they carried out what we should do, we would be able to make that progress where we didn't need it. In fact, when the oversight, which is clearly, in my opinion, obvious, when the oversight commission was proposed, it was shot down in July because there was two versions. One of them was shot down. And when it was shot down, it was a really likelihood that it would not have been carried out because they had already talked about putting it on the election ballot for November. There was talk of that. Okay, at the same time. Now, the reason I'm giving you this is because had it not been for Anthony McClain's death on August 15 to add more momentum and awareness to it, it probably would have been shot down anyway because it is not effective. And I have reviewed the consultant's report. We had a consultant that went out and did an extensive report on the different models of police oversight. We had an independent auditor's model. We had a commission model. And they laid out exactly why each one is appropriate for a specific city. And Pasadena was really only appropriate for the independent auditor's model because, one, we already had a commission. Two, we don't have enough. We're not a big city to have a lot of these kind of things. And more importantly, our targeted community that was impacted is primarily the Northwest. And so when you put all these things together, it only makes good sense to look at the leadership and utilize what we currently have in our system, which is ABA 392. If that had been implemented the day of Anthony McClain shooting, Pasadena would look like an incredible city with its leadership, but it didn't do that.
Well, I'd like to pose this question to all three of you. Do you see the creation of this committee as the city's attempt to be more proactive or reactive?
I see it being proactive. This is something that, again, when John Kennedy brought this to council in 2016, it was, voted against by the majority of the city council. This time around, the council voted unanimously. Now the question is, are we going to, rest on the work that we accomplished and just put it in their hands? And I think, that's where, the broad-based community support that the incorporation of this commission was established. And I don't think people are going to just sit back and watch this to be another version of a body of people that doesn't do anything, that can't accomplish anything. This also has the ability, if the community doesn't see it going into the way that they've envisioned, to put this on the ballot in 2022 with well-defined outcomes for a commission as well as independent police audit.
Gunn, I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. How do you view the way the city's approaching this? Is the creation of this committee more a proactive effort to improve community relations, or is it reactive based on recent events?
Well, I think ultimately the decision to move forward with an independent police auditor and Citizens Police Commission was reactive. I mean, the city council and the mayor finally heard the voices of community members that have been advocating for this for years upon years upon years. The conversation was not a new one. The climate under which the conversation was happening was certainly new. And finally, our council members reacted and responded accordingly. Now, my hope is that the IPA and the commission will engage in work that is proactive so as to ensure that this community will never have to hear another story on the news about a young Black man dying at the hands of law enforcement. It must be proactive to ensure there are no more Leroy Barnes, there are no more Kendrick McDades, there are no more Anthony McLeans. That is the ultimate goal. The commission will be hopefully taking proactive measures alongside the police department and council to make sure that is so.
All right, Mr. Shea, you noted a little earlier that each of the members on the panel this evening is approaching both the situation and perhaps the creation of this oversight committee from slightly different points of view, and that's actually a good thing. Certainly, the idea behind the panel itself is to have an open-ended discussion where everybody can air their points of view, differing though they may be. With that in mind, I would like to get each of your impressions of the current status of relationship between the police department, the governing body in Pasadena, and the communities. And Mr. Shea, I'd like to ask you first. I'm going to direct a question to you first, but I would like each of you to take a turn in answering based on your impressions.
Okay. Well, I'd like to first step back and respond to the question of whether Pasadena is proactive or reactive. They are absolutely reactive. And the reason why they're absolutely reactive, because this is systemic. It has happened enough times in one community where they could take a step-by-step approach, implement a plan of action. They've had a body in place to advise them. And again, these commissions are advisory bodies. They don't have any real authority to enforce any advice that they've given to the city council. So I say that because, again, if the leaders here in Pasadena don't execute the law, then we're going to see this over and over again. So until we see the leadership in Pasadena step up and fire the two officers involved with the Anthony McLean shooting, that is what is called for based on their actions and based on the law. Okay.
And I apologize, I don't mean to be incendiary, but it sounds to me as though, Mr. Shea, your opinion of relationships between the community and the police department are not good at all currently, that there's a great deal of distrust within the community. Would that be fair to say?
Well, it's not. Okay. Here's what I would say, Joe, and to the panel. The video speaks for itself. What the community did is it allowed the chief to be the leader. And the chief led us down his path that he wanted us to see. And his very words was, the video won't lie about what happened to Anthony McLean. The video clearly shows that the officer who shot him in the back twice. It clearly shows that Anthony did not do any threatening. He did not have a gun. There's nothing, and I have seen over almost 1,000 hours of the video. I mean, literally, I do it almost every day since I've made a commitment to this advocacy, so that we as a city can stand strong and say enough is enough. And if our leaders don't recognize this, then it will be in their daily face to understand they need to do something to show leadership. And that's why I do what I do, because I've been committed. I love Pasadena. I love Pasadena media, as Joe and all my colleagues over at Pasadena Media knows. With my producing of 8 years, I've learned how to edit. I've learned how to really take media and make it really something we can cherish with our history here in Pasadena. Beautiful. But we also have a dark side that we need to address as well. And to make it the best transition when we have a difficult time, we need the help of our leaders to step up. And that includes our mayor. It includes our city council members. All of them, instead of taking this very laid back approach and it's a process. No, that was why I wanted to learn how politics work. And now I'm really seeing it. And this is a great test for Pasadena, no matter how it turns out.
Well, Juliana, I'd like to pose the same question to you. How do you feel the current status of the relationship between the community and the police department is, and the city council as well?
I think, Joe, that the unfortunate reality is that there aren't the same relationships between the police and the community throughout the entire Pasadena community. That is to say that there are portions of this city who have a very different relationship with law enforcement, for whom, their major concern might be response time to a potential home burglary. But they're not having the kinds of encounters and negative experiences with law enforcement that other portions of our community have. So I think that the community is divided, and part of the work that we've been doing as advocates and activists is getting folks in communities not impacted by police violence to understand why this is a call to action for everyone, and that there is a role and a responsibility that members in District 7 have in advocating to their council member for the kinds of reforms that are needed, even though there may be the violence is experienced in other portions of the community that they don't live in, right? So I think that overall, I would say because of that reason, the police community relations is not great. There is a significant amount of distrust that must be addressed. I think that accountability and transparency is a way that we can build that trust over time.
Okay, and I'm going to preface this by saying, please forgive me, because as I said with Mr. Shea, I don't mean to put you on the spot. And if you don't wish to answer the question, I completely understand. But building upon something you just mentioned, that there are different perceptions of the relationship between the police department and the community, and that there are divisions. I'm wondering what those divisions are mostly. Are we talking divisions of locality within the city? Are we talking economic divisions, or are these racial or ethnic divisions?
Well, if that question is posed to me, Joe, thank you.
Well, actually, I was going with Juliana, but
okay,
certainly it's there for everybody to answer. So I don't mean to exclude anybody here. If anybody has an opinion on any question, I welcome the response.
Well, I defer to Julianne, so I can hear.
Well, and I think I can provide a brief answer to that, Joe. I think to clarify, it's not about perception. I think it's about differences in lived experience, and it goes beyond perception. I think that there are different experiences, and those differences are based on race. We have to talk about that. That is a truth. That is a reality, that people of color have different lived experiences with law enforcement officials than non-people of color. We have to come to terms with that. That is a reality. And that ultimately, yes, in our own community, that means that those experiences do differ based on geographic region in our community, and also socioeconomic status and national origin as well. I mean, we have a community here of undocumented persons who are deeply, deeply fearful of law enforcement and do not have trust in law enforcement. So it's all of the above.
Okay. Mr. Shea, I know you wanted to chime in on this as well, so please.
Well, the reason why I'm glad I'm following Julianne, because she said it so perfectly. And now I can add to it. the history of Pasadena is imperative that we understand it. Because if we don't act according to what our history, we repeat it. And we've had some very dark, ugly history here in Pasadena. And a lot of people don't know it because they don't know the history of Pasadena. And it has amazed me so much how much history has not been educated to the folks of Pasadena and the students of Pasadena, especially when it comes to people of color. People don't even know that Pasadena had a Black Mecca community at one time. You know that, Joe? I'll let you answer that. Right, we did. We had a beautiful Black community after the migration of the World War II, that Blacks came to Pasadena. And between approximately, I would say 1960 to certainly 1980, Blacks had a nice middle class here in Pasadena. There was Black businesses throughout Pasadena, just unbelievably. But shortly thereafter, there was drugs, there was gangs that came in, and other things that came in that eroded it. And as it did that, which our chief of police came in 85, so he came in at the peak of this period. He saw it, he was orientated to it, and I hope that he didn't stay with that mindset, because he should have grown and understood how important engagement of that same community that he learned from requires him to be in this day and age. And that is what's missing right now. So to me, it suggests, did he pay attention to how history repeats itself so that we can have complete engagement? And that's why I make it a point to educate those that are followers or readers of my posts about the history. I try my best to always be respectful, because I do love Pasadena. I love the Pasadena Police Department. I think we have a great police department. I've been a volunteer with them. I've been a part of them. And I do everything in my power to highlight our city as a beautiful, great city. But we also need leaders who are going to step up and be responsible, accountable, and transparent. And that, in today's era in Pasadena, has not happened, especially when you look at people of color. It just has not happened. There's not been one police officer that has been held accountable for any incident involving people of color. There's not one. No one can see that. And as far as any of the murders that have taken place by officers, and I'm calling them murders because I believe if our chief can call out murder for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all the other Blacks that were murdered last year by police officers, and he did, then he should also realize that the murder of Anthony McClain should be included in it, and he's a part of it. And he has the ability to step up and show leadership and do the right thing, and he hasn't done that. All he's done is relied on protecting his employees and allowing the union and whether that's Steve Mermell or whomever to guide him with this. And it should not be about that. It should be about him showing leadership, because there's a law. And if there's a law in place, no one should be above the law.
I'm afraid that's about all the time we have for this afternoon's show. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my guests, Ms. Juliana Serrano, Mr. Alan Edson, and Mr. Alan Shea for joining us today. Thank you so much. The conversation has been very spirited and very informative, and we certainly appreciate your being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.